Welcome to the Come Up Starter Kit, guys. My name is Shaan and I have a very special guest with me today, Shaan. Shaan is the Recruitment Manager at Bendigo Bank. Today I brought on Shaan to give us a bit of an insight about his career and what it is that he does as a recruitment manager for people wanting to pursue a career within this field. I've had the pleasure of knowing Shaan for some time. He was actually my great mentor when I first got into recruitment, and he taught me all the knowledge that I have today. So I'm especially thankful for him. Thank you, Shaan, for finding the time to chat with me, especially with these unprecedented times. How are you?
I'm very well. It's great to be here with you, Shanks. Good to catch up. Love seeing what you're doing.
Wonderful. Good to see you. I'm going to jump right into it, Shaan. How are you coping with the new way of life and working from home?
I've actually been working from home for about 6 years, so probably 2 to 3 days a week over that time. So I absolutely love working from home. Just the flexibility to go for a run, or even just not catching the train for an hour every day is really helpful to me. So in that sense, it hasn't been too much of a change. I think the main change has been not able to leave the house or go to a restaurant or a bar or anything like that, which makes it challenging. But I'm also conscious that a lot of people haven't done it before. So even our team are trying to stay connected as much as possible through our virtual catch-ups. So every second day we have a morning check-in that anyone can jump into just to catch up and talk about what's happening. And we always try and keep it entertaining on a Friday. So we knock off a little bit earlier and try and come up with some kind of game, whether it's trivia, drawing games, cocktail making classes,
Nice.
and try and keep as connected as possible as we can there. So it's been good, but I'm really looking forward to getting back to the office.
Yeah, nice. How are the cocktail making classes?
Not bad. I'm known for a good espresso martini, so only 3 ingredients needed there. So everyone's quite happy with that.
Very good, very good. Alrighty. And what is your golden nugget for staying sane during these times?
Probably doesn't look like it, but I try and go for a run. I've got 2 giant dogs on the couch sleeping behind me, so about 50 kilos each.
Yeah, wow.
So I try and take them out every day for lunch. And I've got my wife working upstairs, so we try and get our calendars in sync and try and take that hour to take the dogs for a bit of a walk or a jog.
Yeah, very good. Okay, good. Alrighty. So what I wanted to do is start off with your journey. What was your very first job?
I'm pretty sure it was a waiter, but I had some interesting sort of first jobs. So I'm pretty sure waiter was first.
Yeah.
Then I worked in a factory for a while. It was literally picking up yellow pages and putting them onto a stack. Did that for a little while.
Yeah, right.
And then throughout university, I was working in retail.
Okay.
So they were my sort of first entry level jobs.
And then how did you sort of get into, or what made you want to get into recruitment?
After I finished university, so I studied HR and business.
Yeah.
And I just had a friend who was working in recruitment in an agency. He told me a bit about it. I love, I guess, the social aspect of work, dealing with people. So he said, give it a shot, see what you think. And yeah, since then, understanding how businesses run from an agency's perspective was great.
Yeah.
Really understanding what their needs were, figuring out how you can fix their problems with their people. And that led me into, I guess, moving out of agency into the internal space where there's a lot more where you could sort of follow the candidate all the way through and see where you're adding value to the business. So yeah, I've been lucky in a sense. So obviously started working in an agency many years ago now, looking after finance, then moved in-house into Telstra, where I looked after HR. Then I led teams across volume, technology, then head up Telstra Health, and then the opportunity at Bendigo Adelaide Bank came up to help build out the function. So that's where I am at the moment. Absolutely loving it.
Yeah, awesome. So you've had a really, really robust career, especially throughout recruitment, which is awesome.
Yep.
And for people interested in becoming a recruitment manager, what does a day in a life look like for you?
It's a really, really varied role, and it really depends on the maturity of the organisation and function as well. So it's been different for different roles that I've been in, but the one I'm in at the moment was looking at building a centralised recruitment function. So that wasn't part of the bank previously. A lot of their recruitment was getting done by their HR business partners and the managers. So look, that involves everything you can think of, from building the team, developing the team, creating policies, procedures, looking at vendor management, workforce management, contractor management, working on the systems enhancements and looking at what systems we need to implement, putting in reporting and KPIs to be able to track our ROI, all the way through to the employer branding and the EVP. And quite interestingly, probably the smallest part of my job is actually hands-on recruitment. So I still work with the senior executives on their recruitment needs, but it's not the main part of the role. I'd say the majority of my time is working on projects that come up just to changing business needs all the time. So that could be anything from creating a new contingent process to looking at internal mobility, which is really important at the moment, all the way through to, I've been lucky enough to help create the new careers website. So it's a really, really varied role.
Okay. All right, very good, very good. Now, what I wanted to do now, Shaan, was focus on candidates that might be struggling at the moment in their job search. So I know that you have been around the traps for some time, so I wanted to tap into your extensive knowledge and experience. So I guess one of the main things that candidates have issues with is around their CV. So what would be the top 3 things that you would tell candidates to be aware of?
Number 1 would be to get someone to double check it and make sure there are no spelling or grammar mistakes on the CV. It really doesn't reflect well on your application. Obviously, the CV is the first insight the employer has into you, and you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. So that's, I think, the most important. Number 2 is making sure it flows well and it's easy to read. So we receive hundreds of applications each day. So we want the information there in front of us and nice and easy for us to pick up what we're looking for. So what that really means is we want to know where you've worked, what position, for how long, and what your achievements were in each role. So we have to, go up and down the CV a couple of times to try and find that. It's probably time to try and make that a bit more concise. And the last one would be that dot points are better than paragraphs for information. It just makes it a lot easier for the recruiter or the hiring manager to pick up what they're looking for.
Very good. Moving on to the next question. What are your top 3 tips around candidates, especially now we're all being interviewed via video or Zoom? What are your top 3 tips there?
I think it's still be yourself. So obviously the COVID situation has made virtual meetings a new norm. We still want, as the recruitment team, and I know all the leaders in the business do as well, is to see people's personality. We don't, I know this is funny given that you're wearing a suit, but we don't expect people to be wearing a suit at the moment for their interviews. We want you to put a good foot forward, but at the same time, don't go over the top. Let your personality show, be yourself, and just be comfortable. Sort of flowing onto that, which is number 2, is a lot of people are getting really, they're thinking a lot about what's put in their background, making sure they're in a quiet room, which yes, a quiet room is good advice. But I don't think you need to be changing your background to, an office background or having it all, a whiteout background. I think seeing the change and how people are working at the moment, I've seen more clothes hoist and washing and all the rest in my executive meetings that I have in my lifetime. And it's becoming the new norm. And I think a lot of the times in the interviews, we're expecting kids yelling in the background, we're expecting dogs barking. I've had people's dogs jump up. And actually, a lot of the time, things in the background can actually be really good icebreakers. So don't feel like it has to be an absolute corporate meeting at all. And the last tip is probably, it really doesn't matter too much, but having the camera sort of at your head height, and I know it's not always possible, but it does help the interviewer not see directly up your nose. So depending on where your laptop is, you're better off having it at head height, which is just a little tip for you there.
That's very good. I like that one. Very good. And what are some questions candidates should be asking, or what are some questions candidates should be asking at the end of an interview?
So this is a really, really tough one. So personally, unless you've specifically been asked not to ask questions, I don't think that you have to wait until the end of the interview. A lot of the time for me, the best interviews are the ones that feel a lot less formal, that are conversational, that are flowing. A lot of the time, an interview is structured by the manager or recruiter giving you an overview of the role at the start of the interview. I think that is the perfect time to ask a lot of questions that you might have based on what you've just heard about the role, rather than having to wait all the way until the end. Now, the reason I say that is I've seen a lot of people trip up at the end of the interview because they ask questions that have already been answered during the interview. And it really doesn't look good because it looks like you're not listening at all. So I think it's really hard to give you actual questions to ask at the end of an interview. Just make sure that they're genuine and that you actually want to know the answer. Personally, questions about process, I feel like people ask them for the sake of asking it. You know, what's the next steps in the process? How long is this going to take? I don't think that they're overly necessary. For me, I think that there are a few ways you can structure questions at the end. One of them is to look at industry trends or competitors, and then bring that into a question that you're asking, because that's going to build your own credibility. And I think, Shanky, you're quite good at this, and you could probably provide an example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I think for candidates that are coming from a competitive background, one thing that they can definitely use is you want to try and display that you have market knowledge of what the current organization is doing. So if you use, for example, you know, I'm coming from X bank and we had implemented such and such strategies to obtain an ROI in this specific technology or another sort of process within the business. And then you say, I realize that you guys are embarking on this sort of transformation. Is this something that would be of benefit, or what are your strategies that you are looking to get into? And that there hopefully will open up conversation with not only the hiring manager and the recruiter, but with yourself as well.
That's right. Good example.
Very good, very good. And I think this is always one that candidates can relate to as well. And I know that even during my time when I would interview, I would sometimes get stuck on a question. What can a candidate do if they do get stuck on a question and if they can't answer it?
I'm not going to lie, this has happened to me in an interview before. I thought I was doing really well throughout the whole interview, and one of the questions just absolutely stumped me.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things you can do. The most important is don't lie, because you will get caught out. Yeah. Ask them to rephrase the question. That's probably number one. Sometimes if you hear a question in a different light, it can trigger another example for you.
Yeah.
Depending on if the question is at the start, you can always ask to come back to that question at the end of the interview. You might have loosened up by then. The nerves might have subsided, so you might be better off to answer the question at the end.
Yeah.
And lastly, is just to, you know, if you haven't had exposure to what they're asking about, just be honest. Look, this is not something I've had exposure to, but it's something I'm eager to learn, which is why I've applied for this role. It's really hard to answer that question with anything else outside of what I've just said, really, but it happens to all of us, so just don't be too put off by it. Yeah,
very good. Very, very good. And Shaan, look, thank you so much for your time. And lastly, what can we sort of expect from yourself?
We've done some pretty interesting things over the last sort of 6 months at Bendigo Adelaide Bank. So after we've set up the new centralised recruitment function, we're working on our first ever EVP launch. So we've been working on that for a little while. We have just launched our new careers webpage. To be honest, our last careers website looked like it was done probably in the 1980s with some kind of system. So we've finally updated that, which I'm really, really proud of. We've got our new employer branding work, which is almost complete. So there's a lot of rebranding and the employment branding that we're working on at the moment that we'll be launching very soon. And just in terms of the organisation itself, so we're going through a lot of changes. We're going through a pretty large-scale transformation at the moment that's going to bring the bank into the digital world and make sure that we can compete with our competitors and obviously have, I would say, an advantage in a few different spaces. But watch this space. It's going to create a lot of opportunities for candidates out there in the near future. So it's very exciting times at the bank.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shaan, so much for your time.
No worries. It's been great to catch up.
You too, mate. All right, bye.
See you, mate.